All right, go ahead, Dev.
Hi everyone. Myself Dev, and I'm currently the uh, LFX mentee under Nina and uh, Joe. And currently, for this term, we have this project which basically focuses on kgateway and agent gateway tracing integration. So currently, the kgateway with agent gateway only supports uh, static configuration via the config map at the startup. Uh, so this project mostly aims on enabling dynamic configuration for tracing with agent gateway as the data plane. Um, and uh, This is the sample YAML API for this. Uh, mm,
Yeah, so I think maybe let's talk about like the two options for the API in kgateway. So there were, I think, two proposed solutions. One was like using the HTTP listener policy, right? Or the other creating a TB determined like new resource. I think right now it's called Agent Gateway Observability Policy. But maybe you want to talk about like the trade-offs between the two approaches.
yeah, so the main problem with HTTP listener policy is that this is mostly Envoy coupled, and many things are basically in using the Envoy API that so in the when Nina and John Howard were reviewing this PR, they were mostly preferring this new CRD, uh, and yeah, we can basically in this new CRD we can use our own agent gateway specific configuration that we would want apart from this Envoy. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. And I think the doc has some examples of like some config that maybe doesn't really make sense for agent gateway, like access logs, and other things that are very Envoy specific. So I think people can definitely take a look and kind of go through it and see on the control plane side, the different like limitations of like approach one versus approach two. Um, but it does like, yeah, it seemed like most people were pro approach two, so having like a net new API. But if you feel strongly the other way, you should definitely like comment on this proposal. And I think the rest of the proposal kind of delves more into the details of how it's actually going to be implemented on the data plane, because it will require some agent gateway changes around how we actually do the dynamic trace configuration.
So for the data plane changes, Nina has already set me up with John Howard Slack. Uh, so there we can discuss some changes. I think John has uh, given more some. He has suggested some changes, but currently I have not added them on this doc. After basically discussing with him, we can add on this doc.
Yep. Are there any open questions that we want to talk about in this meeting too?
Yeah, I have added the open questions also. So uh, yeah. Mm, yeah, so first was the in the API for this new CRD that we were going to create. So in this CRD, what fields can we take from the Envoy side, and what new agent gateway specific capabilities can we add in this new CRD?
Yeah, definitely. I think for this one, it might make sense to just focus on tracing for now. So although the like observability policy or whatever you want to name it, might have like other things in the future. For now, we can just only have the tracing field, and that can like scope it down and then be more flexible in the future when we add more capabilities.
I have a quick question. So one point that you brought up was the reason why we were not using the HTTP listener policy was because a lot of the fields in HTTP listener policy weren't relevant to Agent Gateway. That could you elaborate that on that a little bit? Because that's a little surprising to me. Because I would think of isn't HTTP listener policy supposed to be meant as an abstract, like general, like here's a policy that you would like to apply. To like look at HTTP listener policy and then have to know in your head that that is like only going to be useful if you install kgateway with the Envoy data plane, and then you'd have to use a completely different API for kgateway installed with the agent gateway data plane. Seems a little bit. It seems a little bit strange. That it makes it seem like our API is very tied to our like underlying implementation.
Yeah, Dev, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to?
Uh, uh, yeah, you can please answer that.
Okay, so yeah, so like HTTP listener policy right now, it has some fields like access logs is very like specific to the Envoy access log filter, and then there's also things like sampling the spawn upstream span, like other gRPC service config that doesn't actually apply in Agent Gateway. It was very specific for configuring the Envoy filters. So it's not actually a very generic policy, unfortunately. Just the way we like developed it was to match, more like what you can do in Envoy today. But like Agent Gateway just like probably will never support those fields because there are other ways of configuring them in that data plane. So it's not really like the way the API is structured like matches the Envoy filter structure very closely, which is probably a mistake to begin with. But it doesn't really match like how Agent Gateway structures its filters and like its policies.
Interesting. Okay, so it's possible. It seems to me that like the Envoy data plane it's going to stick around for a long time for a lot of the more general traffic use cases, and then Agent Gateway is kind of its own specialized thing that only people interested in a specific subset of features would use. Is that correct?
Like we don't want to design this new policy probably to be named Agent Gateway. Like we want it to still be generic. But I think the API just shouldn't be tied to like the Envoy filter configuration. It should be like designed as like a useful like good UX API, not tied to like this is how you configure the Envoy filter one-to-one. So like in the future, like the new API might also apply to Envoy, or like we mark it as different for both. But at least for this iteration, like the new tracing API will be only for Agent Gateway. If you want to configure tracing for Envoy, you'll use the old HTTP listener policy.
Gotcha. Thanks for explaining that.
Were there any other open questions, or did we cover everything?
Yeah, no open questions from my side.
Awesome. Yeah, great job.
Yeah, thanks for writing this up.
One quick question, actually. So when we're thinking, I'm trying to make sure I understand how we're thinking about Agent Gateway in this. It's sort of the idea that if we make it generic, then at some point this can also be brought to Gateway API itself, and that that SIG can sort of see about adopting pieces of it. Is that sort of the idea?
Sorry, I missed my my window. So I mean, it's developed as part of like kgateway, right? So anything in upstream like gateway API would be like developed in that community. So like like Istio, for example, has like a tracing API that is like part of the Istio API, but that doesn't mean that like when there's like an upstream design doc, they don't reference it as like an example of, oh, like we want a generic way to do tracing. Just right now, like we need a way to do dynamic tracing. So we're going to develop this API, but in the future, if Gateway API has like, a shared tracing config that's going to be shared across all implementations, then maybe it makes sense to implement that. But for now, like we need a way to, have this feature. So I think doing it in Gateway API would take like longer to build consensus versus this is like a quick way to get an API into kgateway to enable Agent Gateway to have dynamic tracing.
Yeah, totally. I was just wondering, like, on the side of erring with more options or less when designing, like, if we keep this really streamlined, then it can become one of the sort of reference that is talked about when we think about like what ends up happening in the Gateway API upstream.
Yeah, definitely. And you see that with like, things like the header manipulation, right? Is we used to have it on like, or I think we still have it on traffic policy, but you can use the HTTP route to configure it. So it's like, I think as Gateway API adds more functionality, we'll align with that, but we still need to, keep delivering features. So
Yeah, definitely.
Nice. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if the like kgateway Kubernetes gateway API ever actually implements tracing. From what I can tell, they do have some docs about metrics, but tracing is kind of a mess, even like with, yeah, we'll see. My vote is that it probably won't ever happen for the next like 5 years. All right.
I have a question since we're on the topic of tracing and I just joined kind of late. This is specifically for Agent Gateway, right? So is it going to cover everything from like MCP level observability to LLM to your standard like HTTP type observability, or
yep, so that's the long-term plan right now. Like this feature specifically that we're talking about is like if you use tracing with Agent Gateway today, you have to use that config map and statically enable it. It would be nice to do something more like Envoy does, where you can dynamically configure tracing. So you like have a policy CR that the controller watches and can send that as an XDS update to the data plane, versus that like awkward config map that you have to set once, like restart the pod and then like configure your tracing.
I see. I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions on the tracing EP? Are we taking suggestions on names? We don't need to get into a naming debate. That's a trap. We're not doing that.
It is a trap, but feel free to comment on the PR.
Yes, please have that discussion on the PR, and please somebody suggest something that doesn't have the word Agent Gateway in it. That's my only request. All right. Thank you for your presentation, Dev. I'll go ahead and take over the share to go back to the meeting notes.
Yeah.
All right, hopefully that's showing up. Oh, yeah, this next one is GitHub. Mina, you're okay. GitHub's secure. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this one's quick. Mayo, also feel free to jump in, but we have 2 PRs that are still in review. So if people could give a final pass on them today, they're just documentation PRs, but we want to make sure that there's consensus on the incident response plan and the threat model. And then we've also completed the program. So congrats, kgateway. We're now more secure. And we've actually, as part of that program, got some Azure credits to spend for the project. So if anyone has any fun, ways to use Azure credits, feel free to we can start a Slack thread or like message in the comments. But yeah, we now are flush with Azure credits to use. So
Nice. And was this part of the requirements for our incubation application, or was
No,
it separate?
a
Gotcha.
separate program. Yeah, Mayoa, feel free to jump in and give a background on it, because I think you're the one who found it and suggested we do it. So
Yeah, so basically the GitHub Secure Open Source Fund is just a way for GitHub to, because of how open source, how delicate open source is, so they came up with the idea of training maintainers on security, GitHub security best practices. So it was training that lasted 3 weeks. Myself and Nina, and coupled with over 60 something other maintainers from quite like the popular open source, not just your popular open source project now, were involved in the project. So part of the lessons learned and then what the training is all about is how to secure open source projects. That's what the program is all about. We've activated some things in the repo already, like the dependent bots, the secret code scanning. So those are some of the lessons learned, including, so we're put through on how to go about the incident response plan, the threat model, and the likes. So hence the reason why we have this PR up. It has gone through some phase of review, but so I'd made changes as per the reviews I got, but we still need one last pass to before we are able to merge this. So as part of the compensation for the program, we were given some Azure credit to spend or to make use of, I would say. Yes.
That sounds like a very fascinating program. That's awesome.
Yeah. Although it has not yet been publicly advertised, I would say, by GitHub yet. They said they would let us know when we can, say, make a post about it, or when exactly we can. So until then, that's the reason why we've not, made any post to publicly. So for now.
Understood.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, definitely feel free to brainstorm ways to, feel free to, if you have edit access or not edit access, list ideas down here. I'll move on to the next one. So I don't know if anyone here is new, but we are trying to clean up the good first issues label in the kgateway repo. Hopefully the ones that are not super clear have been removed. And thanks a lot to Tim and Nina and Lawrence, who have been like filing a lot more good first issues. So yeah, if you are newer to this repo and interested in jumping in, this would be a great place to start. I would also like to put in my personal plug for the chaos engineering or fault injection feature in the Kubernetes Gateway API. Nathan, you were talking about this a little bit earlier. This is actually something that I see as like kind of a big gap in between the Kubernetes, the kgateway project and the Envoy Gateway project. Fault injection is essentially where you inject errors into a route and like make a path return 500s or make it take longer. This is a feature that maybe definitely doesn't get used in production, but is used by earlier adopters who want to play around with the project and test. So yeah, that's my personal plug for like person who would be interested in a new feature and who is interested in interacting with the Kubernetes Gateway API. If you are interested in other policy parity, like issues that would be good, like new features to plug in holes in our kgateway project, the policy parity label has been like very carefully groomed by Lawrence in order to give a pretty comprehensive picture of like where we're missing certain features. Wait, did I share that screen? Yes, I did. Okay. Cool. And then last, Mike Uzuku in art. Do you want to talk about the glossary of keywords?
Hey, yeah, I don't think Mike is on the call due to some like time zone differences, so I'll just talk about that. Yeah, if you want to open up an issue, just as kind of an FYI to everyone, one of our community members suggested putting together a glossary of key terms in the doc. So we have an issue open to do that, and Mike has been working on it. And so I just kind of wanted to bring it to this group's attention just for, broader awareness. And if people want to check out the draft of terms, basically what I'm doing right here at the top of it, I'm just trying to collect terms that like just focus on the actual words that we want to do before we go into the definitions. Mike has already started later in the doc, like a table with definitions, but I think just like the actual words first, if we could just kind of agree and kind of get a sense on what we want to include in the glossary for those. That's kind of where we are right now. And then after, we like what terms we want to use, we can go ahead and start filling out definitions for those. And then the hope is that eventually those definitions would also kind of be available when you hover over the term, like over the docs. I don't know if you've seen that on other websites, but it's kind of like a tooltip style. So that way, if people don't, know what the term means, they could just kind of quickly get a refresher or like link to, the API reference docs or something for a particular CRD or something like that. So yeah, that's pretty much all that I wanted to say. If anyone has any questions, let me know.
Nice. Yeah, this would be super helpful.
Cool.
Actually, I saw ambient mesh on there. Is Spire coming to ambient mesh, or is that like on hold indefinitely? I'm only asking because just because of the use cases people are going to be using kgateway / agent gateway for, I'm assuming this is going to be a big question soon.
You mean like integrating Spire with ambient?
Yeah, it's not supported right now. There's an open issue. I think Glue had it, but I don't think it's been open sourced. So
Yeah, I'm not sure because it's kind of a different project. I'm assuming like once it would get in upstream, it would then become available in our, integration with it from the kgateway perspective. Yeah, but I don't know where that stands.
gotcha.
I think this is the issue that you might be talking about. And yeah, this is in the Istio repo. So yeah, definitely react to this if you're interested in it. It seems like there's been quite a lot of discussion about it. But yeah, I think, yeah, Lynn would be the right person to ask about this. And there hasn't been a lot of movement in it in the last month based on this.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was all I had for the agenda. Well, this is the wrong doc. This is the right doc. That was everything I had for the agenda meeting notes. Last call for anyone who suddenly thought of something and would like to add it. If not, then thank you for attending, everybody.
Thanks,
I'll stop
everybody.
sharing and stop recording. Have a great Tuesday.
Thanks. Bye. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks.